I mean, I love that. I'm glad you brought this up because I love when like Lonnie says, like, I think acid will save the world. And it's like this ridiculous thing to say at the time. I mean, now, but at the time, at least to like maybe the hippies, they're like, oh yeah, this is the truth. Like, and at least as we were talking, I really think at least for even, I mean, our generation and especially the next generation, as technology becomes bigger and bigger thing, like the whole idea of like the swipe, like that's the drug of choice. And they think that, oh, I'm going to keep swiping. I'm going to keep on finding, like, I'm going to swipe for truth from dating. Like I'm going to swipe to find my person I'm going to find my rest of the life with, or like if I'm going to find that life hack that will make all the difference. And so help get rid of my, like, I don't know, depression, or swipe to find the latest like workout fad so I can get in shape now. There's always swiping for something. And you're just like, the next one, maybe that's going to be the answer that I've always been looking for.
Whoa. Hey, welcome to At the Movies. My name is Tim. Thrilled that you're joining us today. I'm here with my friends Betty, Tyler, and Autumn. And today we're thrilled to be able to continue the conversation as we're going to be unpacking the film Jesus Revolution. You guys all saw it, right?
Yeah.
Yes,
All right,
yes.
great. Good start for the conversation.
We did our homework.
Well, in either case, if you guys haven't seen it, I want to give a quick summary. So I'm going to read from my notes, and hopefully this is accurate for all of you. So this movie starts with essentially two stories that converge. It begins with this guy named Chuck Smith, who's a pastor in Southern California in the late 60s and 70s. And he's leading a really struggling church with a lot of older people, honestly. And his daughter, Jeanette, ends up giving a ride to this hippie Christian hitchhiker named Lonnie Frisbee, who introduces Chuck to ministering to this new hippie generation. And Chuck starts off really suspicious around it, but eventually he warms up to Lonnie. He welcomes other hippies into his house, and together they start a successful movement that connects young people to the message of Jesus. There's a second story. It's a story of a high school student named Greg, who ends up running away from his military class to join this girl named Kathy, who introduces him to that hippie movement and eventually to drugs. And after some near-death experiences, Greg and Kathy start beginning connecting with Chuck and Lonnie's ministry, and they make a decision to follow Jesus and get baptized. So this movement eventually becomes one of the greatest spiritual awakenings in American history. It's the Jesus Revolution that turns this counterculture movement into a revival that changes the world. Does that sum it up about?
That's really good.
I think you got it.
So we were talking a little bit earlier, but I know there's a lot of strong opinions around Christian movies.
Yeah.
I think also, especially from a lot of Christians, don't like Christian movies.
Yep.
And this one was pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's fair.
So my first question, was this a great Christian movie or the greatest Christian movie?
Wow. What are the other options?
Greatest of all time.
No, but give me your thoughts. Any things that stands out for you about it?
I think for just comparing other Christian movies I've seen, this was just produced well. The script was great. The storyline, everything about it. Like I'm a big feeler, so I didn't have a moment watching a movie that's a Christian movie. Watching it, I never had a cringe moment. Like the cringe of like bad
good.
quality. I never had that. If anything, the cringe moment is like I'm in this story and I feel immersed in it and I can relate. So that was the power it had, but I never had the, oh gosh, this is
so many movies where I was like, no.
Well, I was actually thinking about this as I was rewatching it. And I think the key part that makes it different than other Christian movies is that like the second act of it, where in the first half you have the culmination to like, oh, they have this revival, all these people are showing up, and then you have the second act when like, oh, things aren't going so well. Like Lonnie Frisbee starts to have like his like, oh, like is this really about God or is this really about me? And then like the kind of fallout with Chuck Smith, and then even like the whole relationship part where like now our relationship's not doing well. It's like you had this like kind of the first climax, which was like, oh, we started this revival. This is amazing. And then I would say most Christian movies kind of end there.
Yeah,
it's like, oh man, God did amazing things. And now like we don't deal with the reality that we still have like the rest of our lives to live and things don't always go well. And so I really think that's what sets this apart, at least in my opinion, from other Christian movies, is that you have this actually like kind of the reality is like, okay, we're going to like now that you've like become a Christian and like everything's good, like everything doesn't stay good. Like you still have to go through life. And so I think that's what's beautiful about this movie.
Yeah. I think there are a lot of people in the movie, like Kelsey Grammer was someone I didn't know that he was actually a Christian. So that was cool, assuming that he is. But regardless, I think just seeing how the movie played out in such an inspiring way. I think a lot of Christian movies afterwards, I'm kind of like, ooh, like scared of like, I need to change or act a certain way. But I think this movie was really inspiring and just showed a lot of the different parts of being a Christian and the reality of coming from maybe messy background and jumping in and figuring out like, what is it that God is calling me to? And I don't need to kind of like put on certain clothes or act a certain way to fit in.
There's a big theme in that movie in the beginning, especially around the hippie generation searching for truth.
Yeah.
Right? That's kind of the what they were talking about was really the aspiration for the hippie movement. And there was something that Lonnie said, and it was near the beginning. I think he was saying it to Chuck, where he said, they're all searching for the right things, but in the wrong places.
Yep.
And so they were looking through this like enlightenment through drugs, right? Essentially, like they open themselves up to bigger truths in life. What's the equivalent to that today? Or maybe if you don't have like an equivalent that you can think of in our context, maybe even from your personal experience, like in that search for truth.
Yeah.
That's so good. When we watched this movie and we came out, we watched it with young adults from our group. And we were in the car asking the question, like, what is that thing for this generation? Or are there a few things that they're addicted to, or like that will, be similar to what the youth in that generation were looking to find their to find truth. And you had something really good to say.
I mean, I think at least I love that. I'm glad you brought this up because I love when like Lonnie says like they think acid will save the world, and it's like this ridiculous thing to say at the time. I mean now, but at the time, at least to like maybe the hippies, they're like, oh yeah, this is the truth. Like, and at least as we were talking, I really think at least for our generation and especially the next generation, as technology becomes bigger and bigger thing, like the whole idea of like the swipe, like that's the drug of choice. And they think that, oh, I'm going to keep swiping. I'm going to keep on finding, like, I'm going to swipe for truth. And like, I'm just going to keep on scrolling through my feed, whether that's whatever your feed of choice.
Feed of choice.
But I'm going to like, it's from dating, like I'm going to swipe to find my person I'm going to find my rest of the life with, or like if I'm going to find that life hack that will make all the difference. And so help get rid of my, like, I don't know, depression, or swipe to find the latest like workout fad so I can get in shape now. There's always swiping for something, and you're just like, the next one, maybe that's going to be the answer that I've always been looking for.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's good. I also think being in the Bay Area, one thing that I found is just the purpose of like trying to find your purpose, or whether that's in a job title, a salary, competing to figure out what that looks like. I think there are a couple of people, and when I worked for a big tech company, there was an individual who talked about they thought that once they got this position, everything would change and everything would just fall into place. Everything would be perfect. And then she got that position and she was just as depressed as she was before. So trying to find what that meaning and what that purpose is. And when you've checked off all the boxes and you still don't have that, then what's left,
That's good. I think it's like even just tied with like money. It's like not even the position. It's like, I know a lot of people are like, if I just make this much amount of money, and it's like, oh, you just make a little more. And then it's just kind of that same drug. It's like, oh, if I just like work a little harder, work a couple more hours.
Yep.
Yeah.
What's you guys been experience with that? Like, I know all of us around the table here are followers of Jesus. We're involved here at Echo.Church. Have you had this kind of journey that led you to kind of like what Greg essentially came to his own conclusion at the end to follow Jesus? But it was a journey. I'll share a little bit on my end. First, maybe you guys can think about it. But I have this like nature of like, this is, if you guys follow the Enneagram, you guys follow the Enneagram?
Yes.
I'm a 7.
Yeah.
You guys know what you guys are?
Yeah.
You're 1?
Yes, I'm a 1.
4,
3. I'm a 3.
Okay.
3 wing 2.
Nice.
Achiever. Why'd I bring up that comment?
So with the 7 in the Enneagram, like the propensity is what they call the sin of gluttony. And not that I'm eating a lot, you can tell. But the gluttonous part of me is the like always seeking for the next thrill or the next like thing to grab my attention.
Yep.
And so for me, like even historically, like I've been on the team here at Echo for a while, but I've had like a different role like every 2 years. And I need something to keep myself like on my toes. All my hobbies in life have like changed every 2 years. There's been this like looking for the next thing, the next thrill, the next adventure. And that's been pretty consistent throughout my whole life, that I'm seeking for this satisfaction in life around these like external things. And when it eventually it gets boring. And so then I go to the next thing. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'll pick up on there. Speaking of the Enneagram, I guess if we're going to bring that up. Yeah. So I'm a 1, which is perfectionist. And so kind of, I think I resonated so much with like that whole, like, what I brought up about like swiping be the drug of choice, because like, I like to think that I always have the answers. I do everything the right way. That's what I do. And you can ask my wife that.
all the right answers.
Yeah. Like I have the right answers. I know like if we want to have the right diet, this is what we're going to do, and blah, blah, blah. And it leads
And he's disciplined.
Yeah. And yeah. Well, I try to be. And I think for me, like growing up, I think I was always trying to like be one ahead of everybody. Like when it comes to like, oh, do I have the right answer here? Do I like, oh, I know how I'll respond to this person, or if there's like this issue. And so I think I like to have kind of collect more information and kind of have the right answers to everything. And I think it's kind of what you brought up. It like gets to that, like, it's like a unending pursuit. Like you're just like, there's always somebody that has a better answer. And so I find myself like, either leading to where I think I'm right and I'm actually wrong, and that leads to a lot of like tension in our marriage, where like I've thought about how I should like how I should be the best husband I should be, but really I'm not being a good husband, and like I keep going forward without like, and then it comes to a point where Betty's like, you gotta snap out of this, like you're wrong, like yeah. And so
Short words, I use multiple words.
Yeah.
Prove that point.
Yeah. And sometimes I need multiple words because it takes me a while to like actually unwind the truth that I think I've established in my mind about what is like the best thing. And so, I think that's like me just growing up in one, and just like realizing that I don't have all answers, like, and like realizing that when I seek God, that's where I usually find the truth that usually grounds my life. So,
Babe, can you share how you accepted Jesus?
Oh,
I think it's a beautiful story that just re-emphasizes like the personality that God has given him, and it's just like, oh yeah. So I won't preface it, but I just feel like it relates.
Sure. It's not a long story. I grew up in a Christian home. My parents, like I went to church basically every Sunday growing up, and I accepted Jesus when I was really young, and basically here's how it went. I don't remember what happened that day. Maybe I went to church and came home. They talked about like making the decision to follow Jesus. And when I was at home, I was in the living room, and at that time we had like a stereo like TV system with like these big speakers on the left and the right of the TV. And I was like I think I was like 4 or 5 years old. I was just sitting there like laying on the carpet floor with my feet up on the speakers and just like thinking to myself, I was like, I guess I should follow Jesus. And that's it. Story. And so.
And he's been on the straight and narrow.
Well, I would say, there's more to that, but that's where I would say when the decision I made to follow Jesus. While I think there was a lot of growth that still needed to be had, and that didn't really happen until college, but that was when the first time I like decided to have a relationship with Jesus.
Nice. No existential crisis or anything at 4 years old. Just like, it's a good idea.
Yeah, it's like,
probably good.
I think this is the right thing.
It makes logical sense. There's plenty of proof for the resurrection.
Man.
That
cracks me up.
I did not think I was going to share that story here.
No, that's good. That's good. I'll jump off of that. But I'm an only child, so I think from a young age it was very like, I need to prove myself. I need to, go out and seek friends and perform well and kind of like get attention from a really young age. And I think that's something that carried on through college. as you're trying to get good grades and go to, the different activities and build that resume. And that's always been something that I think I put a lot of my purpose in. And then past college, I was really at a point where I kind of was like, what am I doing? Where am I getting my purpose? And whether that was a new job or next job. And then my first job out of college did not go well. And that was something that really hit me of like, what am I doing? And although I'd been a Christian and grew up in a Christian home and all of that, I think I didn't really fully know the purpose of what's next for me until after college. So getting plugged in and realizing like I do need church, and that's something that can't just be, on a Sunday or happen on just like I just show up to add it to my resume kind of thing, but this is something that will give me purpose, and I don't need to keep searching for what's next. And that's something that I think this movie too did a really good job of, because there's a lot of students actually, or different college age kids, and they talked a lot about, what's next or what are we doing. And I think even at one point when they were talking about getting married, the dad's like, what are you going to do? How are you going to support my daughter? And it's like,
I can relate.
Yeah.
I had that conversation.
And it's a valid point, but I think realizing of like putting that trust in God, and God will provide those next steps, and being able to just kind of, I guess, rest in that. I think this movie did a really good job of kind of like God's plan is way more significant than what we even can plan for ourselves.
Yeah, that was pretty real. Yeah. I'm going to pivot a little bit, going back to another conversation in the movie. Not a conversation, but a moment in the movie where essentially Chuck Smith, who's, again, the pastor of this older dying church, he makes a decision. You know what? I'm going to allow these hippies to come in and to be a part of this church. And we have the benefit of history to be able to see, like, obviously that was a great idea. Yeah. And even as you're watching the film, you're probably like, yeah, obviously, why wouldn't you? Like, if your church is dying, you're left with like 12 people. Yeah. Like, why wouldn't you try and reach a new generation? Yeah, it seems, and I'm sure it is, and it was really difficult. Why do you think that is? Why is that so hard? Because I think it would be even today, right? Like, if we were to put ourselves in his shoes, it would be hard, right?
I think it's just hard because I feel like, aside from just trying to picture myself in his place, but when we've grown up in a certain way and you're used to a certain way of life, and then there's the other, it can be so scary. And so it's changing. It might force you to change, and change can make people uncomfortable. And maybe, I don't know, I'm 31 right now, so I don't know if the older I get, if I become more and more resistant to change. I don't know. I'm like in the middle part of my life. But I think that was one thing that was hard for him, is just he didn't know how it would impact him, his ministry, his reputation. There's a lot of things at risk, even though obviously in hindsight, everything like, oh, that was totally worth it. But in the moment, it's like, you've never seen it done before. And I love in the movie, the beginning part of the movie, him and his wife are sitting and watching TV. That's kind of what it feels like when you're not encountering people. For example, for them, it was the hippies, and they were painted in a certain way. And so they were looking at the TV like the world was going to end. And it got me even thinking of like, what is that for us? And where we look at it like, oh, do we think like this generation is so far off that there's no hope? And so I love that moment. And then the moment where he actually meets a hippie that he was terrified, scared of, and happens to be a Christian. So it's like, it challenged his like paradigm. And it was like, he had to change, because he heard, when you sit across from somebody who's different than you and you hear their story, and that hippie loves Jesus as much as Lonnie did, you're forced to change. Like, oh, wow, this is not actually what I thought. And so I think that's what happened. And it was beautiful to see even just a generational a gap that existed to just be bridged by all of this.
I think one of my favorite scenes was when they first had that band that was playing in the church. Like, all the early guys were like shocked by it, and then they're announcing he'll be back next week, but our drummer here, he's not going to be here because he has to serve the rest of the sentence for his truck position.
This is so real.
Like, could you imagine that in church today?
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, I think, I mean, even I just remember going off that, there's another powerful scene just like a couple, like a little farther into the movie where like they have the whole tension where like basically Chuck Smith is like, this is the direction we're going. Like, we're going to love like these people that are showing up. And if you don't like that, like the door works the other way.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah. And then like you have the three, like, people that represent like we don't like this. Like two of them get up and walk out, and then you have the last guy stand up, and you're like, oh, he's about to walk out too. But then no, he walks across the aisle and like goes sits with the hippies, and like just like a powerful scene of like, oh yeah, like crossing the aisle, and just being willing to like yeah, like
Be
reach out to
uncomfortable
reach out to the other, as you put it earlier.
Here's the part that, like, to me, I felt, I've worked in church for a long time, and I felt the weight of what the decision Chuck was making, because like I think it was a few scenes earlier to that where he's being confronted by like essentially the elders of the church,
Yeah.
saying you're going to lose people.
Yeah.
You're going to lose some of your biggest contributors to the church.
Yeah.
When you're already a church that's 20 people, you're not making a lot.
Yeah.
And you're saying like essentially the people who make this church viable are gone.
Yeah.
And you're bringing these homeless kids to become the main congregants of your church.
Yeah.
There's like a potentially life-altering decision he's making for himself and for his family at this point. Yeah. Tough.
Huge decision.
Yeah.
There was something that Chuck's wife said a little bit later in the movie as well, when they were again talking about this like search for truth and what's truth, and she said, "The truth is always quiet. It's the lies that are loud." I think they were watching TV or something when they were saying this. Has that been your experience?
Yes.
Yeah.
Very much so. I think especially with big decisions too, it's something that you can just kind of overthink, and going back to my achiever self, but just even thinking about, applying for jobs or getting the next best thing, like that was something that was always in my head of like, oh, you need to do this or that, or a lot of people around me and listening to culture of like, oh, why don't you have this like, huge like 6-figure salary and have this big house or these things, and going back to like, no, what God has provided is enough, and that's like more than enough, and building off of that. So
It's because you live in San Jose.
I know,
Yeah.
but that's something that I think and especially I think I tend to be a people pleaser. So that's been really hard for me. So I think kind of in the movie of going back to that point of like, if you're trying to please all these people in the church and you're still trying to do what you think God is calling you to do, and that tension and holding that tension and being able to step through that and not have to listen to what these lies might be, it's difficult.
Yeah, I think there was also a part where she added to that. She said, like, the truth is quiet, but also she said, like, it's simple. And I was thinking about that. I was like, is that true?
Is it simple?
Yeah.
That's
Like,
a good question.
Yeah. And I think what I was getting, or what I was thinking about is like, a lot of times I find myself and I see like other people, it's like, you always want to make it something more complicated than it is. It's like, oh, like, I don't know. I'm trying to come up with an example now. Like, oh, if I want to become like, we're going back, we're on a diet right now, so that all my thoughts are about food. So like, I'm like, okay, if I want to get healthy, it's like I can. Oh, there's all these different supplements I can take, or all these different like workout routines, or these like, I don't know, machines or like technology I can use now to help me get fit. But like the truth is, you just have to like basically watch like what's coming into your body. Like, are you counting calories? Like, are you like, when are you eating? Like, and it's like, if you follow those, like, if you think about those simple things, like, you will probably lead to a healthy life. But we find a lot of times that we want the more, I don't know, we want to find the more profound truth. It's like, oh, what is out there? Because like the easy way is sometimes, even though it's quiet and simple, it can be also really hard. And so I think I think there is something to like just us as humans that we want the new thing, the more complicated. I don't know if more complicated, but like sometimes like the simple truth is unsatisfying.
Yeah. I heard one time a message from Pastor Andy Stanley in Atlanta. He did a message. This was years ago. He talked about how Christians are always like longing for like deep content for them to like digest, and they'll hear a message that is like bringing something that's so complex that they're like, oh man, it's so profound.
Yeah.
And he said, no, it's not. It's just complicated.
Yeah.
It's not that it's more profound. It's just you've made it more complicated for people to understand. And a lot of things are actually very simple to understand, but we have this like hunger for something more, and we think that complicating it is actually more satisfying, but not necessarily. Going in Act 2, like you were talking about Act 1, Act 2 of the movie, going in Act 2, Greg's made this decision, and he was super engaged in the church. He's had opportunities and everything. And then it gets to a point where like a lot of things go wrong for him.
Yeah.
I have a list of a few things that happened. He got rejected by his girlfriend's dad. He got passed over by a job he was really excited about, right? He was hoping to like work in this church essentially. He found out the truth about his family history for the first time. He eventually sabotaged his own relationship with Kathy because of all that. And then his mentor, which was Lonnie, left. Right, he left him despite like him pleading for him to please stay. All these things, and then he's struggling. This is around the time where he's actually, I think, about to break up essentially or try to separate with Kathy. And he asks her, "What if this is just another trip?" Right, because they have this background of being on drugs to like search for the truth and being enlightened. He's like, well, what if this was just all a trip at the end of it? Tyler, I want to hear from you on this. You made a decision. You said you're 4 years old.
Yeah.
Did you ever get to that point of like, or were you just confident from 4 years old till now?
We're about to have a rededication.
Wow.
Are we about to rebaptize you?
Yeah. No, I mean, so I was kind of hitting on that a little bit so I made the decision, but then I grew up in a Christian family. It was very comfortable. Like I didn't have to really make any hard decisions. Like, I would say even like, I didn't really even experience that kind of like Christian high of like, oh, like I went to like this big like worship experience and like I'm just like, oh my gosh, I just feel so emotional until much later in my life. And so, but I say that just because it was just very like, I didn't really have to think too much about it, and I just went about my life. Like I did go to church on Sundays, but like I would say I didn't really invite Jesus to really impact like into my daily life that often because I was just like. It was kind of more, I was just like culturally Christian. Yeah. And then when I went to college, I went to a private college not a Christian college. That was where I really had to like decide for myself, like, what do I believe and wrestle with that. And that was kind of like the first time I would say that I like I entered Act 2 where like, it's like, oh, it's not so easy. Like, okay, now that when everybody around me doesn't believe the exact same thing, or if I don't have anybody around me telling me to go to church, like, what do I believe and what do I decide? For myself, and I started searching. Like, if anybody's gone to college, most colleges have like club fairs. So I started signing up for a bunch of different things, and I did luckily sign up for one Christian group, and I started going to that. And I'm trying to think how to best say that. Basically, it took a long time. Like in the sense of like when I first joined it was like I wasn't ready. The people weren't exactly what I thought because I grew up with my family. Like these are like the people how my family acted. That's how I was used to Christians acting, and so the people in this group were a little different. And so I didn't vibe right away, and so I lead me not to really get too much involved, not to really pursue it too much. So I leaned into my studies, or I leaned into finding other friends outside of that. But I still did because I believe because I made that decision to follow Jesus when I was very young. I still had this longing in my heart. Like I knew what my heart believed. I knew that I had that, like, that Jesus was the only thing that could fulfill that. And so, but I just didn't know how. I didn't have the tools and resources at that time to like figure out how to develop that relationship without just being at my house and just being like have my parents and stuff leading me.
Yeah.
And so I think then so it took a while, and then slowly I like started had friends that were also Christian I met at school, and then that kind of helped push me to engage into that and like reading the Bible and engaging in like conversation about what do I actually believe. All that being said is that I think when I finally had that like ups and downs of like, oh, what do I believe? I felt like that kind of helped set the foundation that like this is not just going to be easy peasy the rest of my life. Like everything's going to be like sunshine and rainbows. Like Jesus is good. I mean, he is good, but like life is hard. And so we still live in this world. And I think that whole searching process through college kind of set the foundation that I am ready for this. I am ready for the long haul here. And I know there's going to be good days of following Jesus. Well, I think every day is a good day of following Jesus, but some days are going to be hard days.
Yeah. Anybody else like me, like made a decision to follow Jesus like 20 times? I was like, I don't know if I really did it. I'm going to do it again.
Well, you grew up that.
Yeah, like every time there's an altar call, like just to be safe.
Just repeat it, just in case. Yeah.
I was the opposite because I'm a perfectionist in me. I was like, I made a
already
decision
did it.
when I was 4 years old. I don't have to make a decision again. So I was always, I'm keeping my hand down.
Wow, it's hilarious. Yeah, I've had many doubts. There's even times, even like in recent days, where I'm like, am I being crazy? Like, is this real? And then I'm reminded it is very quickly, but it's tempting to want to give up essentially on these things. Yeah. All right, last question as we're wrapping up here. So out of what they did, like out of this little Calvary church, created this movement in California with probably one of the most unlikely groups of people, honestly. And it's eventually swept the nation, right? There was like a whole Times article about it, and it was happening all around the country. One of the biggest revivals ever to happen in our country, and it was transforming the lives of people, and they were sharing it. What do you think it would take today for that kind of movement to happen? I know. Got to close it out with a good one.
I think getting the experience of finding purpose, and I think for me it was and I think actually a lot of people have said to me, okay, does it take some traumatic event for you to become a Christian? Because that's what I've seen happen with a lot of people, you know?
Yeah.
And that's a really valid question. And sometimes I don't even know how to answer that. But I think for me, what happened was going from such a dark season to being pulled out of that. But then, like we said, there's roller coasters of seasons, you know, and I've gone back into some of those again, like really dark, traumatic seasons, but knowing that like there is a support to pull me out of that. And I don't need to do that on my own, whether that is just me going to God myself, but the community around me. So I think when people find community, that's really what gets us through life, you know, and I think for me, it's church community, but having other people to lean on, whether it's the ups and the downs, and being pulled into like, hey, we've got your back, you know, that's something that I think a lot of people are looking for that maybe they haven't yet found. So I don't know the exact answer, but I think for me, it would be community.
I think there's a lot of things that come to my mind. The first thing is just it's God, right? Like the time, we don't know where the Spirit moves, right? It's just kind of, it happened when it happened, and God is orchestrating time and like what significant events are going to happen when. And so we don't know that. But one thing I've learned and noticed in this story and is that it's just started with people experiencing the love of Jesus and being on fire and wanting to share that love with other people. So just starting with just that, just having a relationship with Jesus, us loving people the way Jesus asked us to love people. And then people are attracted to that, and they will, if we are just partnering with God and taking ourselves out of it. And because that's one thing that was like really profound in the story, is that Lonnie got to a point where it was about him, and his pride and ego got in the way. And even for those of us who are in ministry, it's just such a good reminder to take ourselves out of it. At Echo, we did a series called Hero Maker at one point. Yeah. It was so powerful because I feel like growing up, it's like you be the hero. Like I think we all maybe have an inner desire to be that hero, but there's much more power when we are the hero makers, or like, and then just like passed on. So it was like Lonnie and then Greg and well, even Chuck, like helping Greg get to that point, and Greg now impacting other people, and just that cycle, that continuum. And so, yeah, just people taking our pride or our ego out of it and just saying, hey, God, like, what are you doing? And I'm signed up to partner with you in how you're moving, whether it's 4 people in a room and that's the impact we're making, or are you planning to call a whole generation and for us to love them. So, I feel like there's like 2 things, like our heart and God also just wanting to use that.
Yeah, I think so good about the like your heart, because I think what you see looking at Chuck, I feel like I relate a lot with him of like, oh, I've been following Jesus. And so I have a certain expectation of what following Jesus looks like. But I think, I don't know if this is how you start a revival, but at least for how you like started like following Jesus is like being willing to like get into the messy parts of life and like, oh, what if, like, I thought you brought up a great point about, okay, what if I lose the key members that contribute to the congregation to basically give that pastor a job? And so to be able to support his house, to support his family. And I think a lot of times, like myself, I wrestle with that idea. It's like, it's very easy to want a comfortable, easy life. But I think following Jesus, like, especially like where the Spirit moves, is not usually comfortable or easy. It's like, oh, I have to like, okay, Jesus, like this is pretty scary right now. I gotta trust you. And I think that's where it's being willing to get out outside your comfort zone, and maybe sacrifice some things that usually are like modern comforts.
A couple of things that, like in reflection to even what happened there, I think one key ingredient was that it was young people that led the movement. It was a new generation, but it was working in conjunction with an older generation that was willing to take those risks as well. And then it was obviously a move of the Holy Spirit as well, because it was happening simultaneously across the country. So even though you could say that like what happened with Chuck Smith and Lonnie was where it all started, it spread before even they had anything to do with it. And so there was something God, I think, was already at work in the hearts of people. But I think it did start with people submitting themselves to God, with young people taking charge of the movement, and with the older generation, like taking those chances. That's awesome. Well, hey, Betty, Tyler, Autumn, thanks for joining me in this conversation about the movie.
Thanks for having us.
Great.
That was a great time. Well, I hope that all of you were encouraged. I hope you were able to pull some nuggets and out of this conversation. And make sure you join us again next week at the movies. We're going to be kicking off with our 4th movie, which is going to be Avatar: The Way of Water. We got an incredible message from Pastor Regis. So make sure you come and join us at any of our campuses or online at Echo.Church. Echo.online.church. That's where we're going to be streaming our live services on Sundays, and you can find us there. And then we'll be back for more conversation with some other friends around the next movie, and I hope that we get to see you there. Have a great rest of your week. We'll see you next time. You did it!
Good job, guys.
Without notes, too.
Yeah, without notes.
Wow.